Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we return to talking about movies getting canceled because they're not politically correct enough in this current day and age. We of course have seen this happen for a number of reasons in 2020, mostly related to the controversies going on in current year. More recently, the escapades that have been coming out of Minneapolis, Minnesota have caused all kinds of chaos to spread throughout the country. More specifically, lots of race baiting and racial tensions have been amplified in response to this terrible arrest that went wrong. It's caused all kinds of bad things to happen, including more events and riots and demonstrations going crazy across the nation, across the planet. And in addition, lots of people have been rioting and looting and destroying stores. Statues have gotten torn down for being offensive and racist. And in addition, media properties and companies have been attacked too. We've talked about this in a number of different angles, specifically how bands like Lady Antebellum have had to change their name for having to do with the Civil War. Movies have been removed from streaming services like HBO Max, like the movie Gone with the Wind, a very famous movie. And in addition, pancake syrups have had to change their name and mascot because of their relation to things from our past and how everything's getting called out. Everything that could be possibly racist or offensive or anything that might be dated is all coming to light now. And what's happened is first it started with racial stuff like this, and now it's like anything old could be offensive. It could be to do with race. It could have to do with, a bad joke that wouldn't fly these days. It could have to be do with a character being portrayed that might not be so smart. A lot of things are coming to light, and that brings us to today's story. Today we're talking about a couple of other older movies, specifically Forrest Gump and Indiana Jones, two classic characters in classic films, in my opinion, and they're also being put on the chopping block and possibly being canceled. Some woke journalists are bringing it up and trying to call out a bunch of movies, and we're going to go over all the details and why it's bogus today. All that's going to be gone over real soon, but first, let's take a quick moment to check out our sponsor. With all this talk about diseases and other viruses spreading around and people required to wear face masks all over the place, why not get yourself a very professional one from Freedom Mask today? And if you order from NoBS, you can save up to 60% on this very comfortable, very stylish new mask that also has washable filters. Most importantly, it'll keep you safe. It'll protect you from contaminants. It stays safe from polluted air and environmental pathogens and all that stuff. So it's a good deal and only available to the audience today. So I'm very excited to offer it to you. You can get 60% off if you order just by clicking the link below this video. Make sure you check out that exclusive link. Check it out, support the show, and get yourself a Freedom Mask today. Great, now that that's out of the way, let's get to this article and these movies that are getting canceled. This story comes from Variety. It's called 10 Problematic Films That Could Use Warning Labels. Now, this is a very subtle sort of way so far to cancel it. They're just kind of suggesting some more warning labels. And this again harps back to what happened with the Gone with the Wind film. Gone with the Wind was a film featuring stories and different things happening during the Civil War era here in America. That war, of course, had lots of racial implications. It involved freeing black people and stuff like that. So it was obviously considered offensive by woke leftists in the present. So they pulled that movie from HBO Max, and now they're probably going to put it back on with some kind of warning label saying, oh, be careful, watch out for this, watch out, make sure this doesn't trigger you, that kind of thing. And they might even cut out or alter some scenes. Netflix and other streaming services have been known to do this, so I wouldn't be surprised if this happened with these new movies being suggested by Variety. Variety is a very famous and very big publication based out of Los Angeles, so they're pretty tied in with these films and these streaming services that they eventually go on. So this is their suggestion. This is an article from Tim Gray, already featuring a picture of Forrest Gump. I think we can guess why that might be offensive. But first, let's see what they have to say themselves and see where this goes. It's now widely accepted that despite being a beloved classic, Gone with the Wind needs an explanation of its content when it's screened on TV or in theaters. HBO Max says it will eventually restore the Oscar-winning film to the service, but with context and framing. It's a start, but Hollywood's vaults are filled with movies that could benefit from an explainer or disclaimer about outdated depictions of race, sexuality, disabilities, and more. The films most often cited are racist, of course, are Birth of a Nation and Song of the South, but the range of problematic films is wide, including Breakfast at Tiffany's. Mickey Rooney's stereotype role as a Japanese man is appalling. West Side Story, Puerto Ricans are shown almost only as gang members. And 1975 slave owner drama Mandingo. jaw-dropping, and apparently aimed at a certain demographic. All films should be viewed with a critical eye, but that doesn't mean banning them. These films represent the era in which they were made, and it's important to remember history and human bigotry and insensitivity so we don't repeat those things. Next, we're going to get to a list of movies that supposedly need a warning label, and I think we could already see where this is going. We could see this writer is very left-leaning, possibly an SJW, just really kind of pushing the woke stuff, saying this is necessary and a good sign when I think we can all agree this is bad. This is rewriting history. This is reframing stuff. Sometimes they're even retitling or re-editing things. I mean, that's where this is going. We're deleting history. It reminds me a lot of possible book burners from World War II, people in like 1984 or that old sci-fi book Fahrenheit 451 where they burned books, stuff like that, where they just want to delete the history and remove stuff just so people can't see it and like maybe get the wrong ideas. They want to kind of make things more pure, at least in their eyes. I don't buy it. I'm not a fan of this. I think these films can just be fine on their own. They don't need warning labels. Like, people can look it up and look into things on their own. And I also think that, this is also about kind of having control. The liberals want to control the media and what people can see or can't see. And they're just kind of like getting very cocky. They're getting very confident and overconfident and thinking they can control everything, which is really kind of the worst part. The first film is called Dirty Harry. This is starring Clint Eastwood, a classic gunslinger style movie. It says Lieutenant Harry Callahan of the San Francisco PD is determined to uphold the law, even if he has to break the rules. It started a craze for movies about maverick cops who get the job done by following their instincts rather than the law. The film mocks liberal judges and do-gooders, and the villain claims police brutality, planting the seed for other such charges are fake moves to get sympathy. So, this is obviously bad. I think mostly because he's a cop. I think the fact that it's pro-cop a little bit, showing that these guys are heroes. We know that anti-cop is the big push right now. Liberals hate law enforcement. They hate law and order. They hate rules, and they hate following things. Unless it's their rules. If they were the cops, they're fine with it. But since it's Clint Eastwood too, Clint Eastwood is known to be a longtime kind of conservative figure, one of the few in Hollywood. And also, you can see they're bashing liberals in this movie, like these liberal judges, these kinds of people that are biased and pushing their own agendas, which makes sense because this thing takes place in San Francisco, which was still and always was starkly liberal. Even back then, they were known to have the hippie movement and all kinds of stuff going on back in the day. So I don't agree with this at all. I don't agree with any of these kind of warning labels. I can understand we're kind of explaining why the left would want to do it because they just want to control everything and make everything, sterilized and clean. But we're against that, and we like these classic movies, and we think they should just have their own chance and let people watch them if they want. If they don't want to watch it, that's fine too. No one's like forcing anyone to watch any of this stuff. Next is Forrest Gump. The picture of that was up at the front. That's Tom Hanks' Forrest Gump. He's possibly getting canceled because Forrest Gump was kind of a slow guy. This article says it this way. They say, Forrest Gump was made by intelligent people, won 6 Oscars, and is beloved by many. While the film is condescending to anyone with a disability, Vietnam vets and people with AIDS, among others, it's actually hostile to protesters, activists, and counterculture. As a bonus, lovable title character Nathan Bedford Forrest was named after his grandfather, the first Grand Wizard of that very bad group. So they're actually not even addressing the fact that Forrest is kind of slow. Like, some people would even say he's like has a mental problem, like a disability, but I don't actually think that. I think what's a good point comes from another now offensive movie. They talk about Forrest Gump in the movie Tropic Thunder because there's a joke in that film where the main character, Ben Stiller, he plays this slow character, but it's actually like fully slow, like very mentally challenged. And that doesn't go over well. He thinks it's a good idea because a lot of Hollywood types back in the day would play these characters and win Oscars. But what he does is he goes too far. And that's why they say in the film, they say never go full R word. You can't say that word in this video, but you know what I mean if you've seen the movie. And then also the character that's explaining it to Ben Stiller, this is played by Robert Downey Jr. And in that movie, he's actually wearing transracial makeup, which is another reason that movie is controversial now. It has that slow character and it has a transracial makeup character. But the point is, and the reason I bring this up is he talks about Forrest Gump and saying how Forrest Gump actually isn't mentally handicapped. He's not that far. He's just like a little bit of a slower guy. He's not like super dumb either. He actually is a war hero. He wins ping pong tournaments. Like, he does a lot of really smart stuff. He invested in Apple or something. Like, he ends up doing a lot of smart things, even though he kind of seems like a mild-mannered guy. So I can understand why they don't address that here, but I think you guys get the point. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is next on the chopping block. It says, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are generally compassionate filmmakers, but this film went a little too far in trying to replicate the mood of 1930s action serials. Like those old movies, the exotic villains are portrayed as primitive, bloodthirsty foreigners, resulting in negative and stereotypical depictions of India and Hindu customs. So we're going after Temple of Doom. This is the second Indiana Jones movie. It definitely has some interesting moments in it, but I think that's why it's fun. Like the description here says, it's a kind of remake, a re-stylization of these 1930s serials that were much more over the top. And this was a modern take on it. And in it, Indy visits this village. He saves them. There's probably some problems with liberals and this whole white savior complex. That's a problem they always have. And yeah, they're basically just trying to defend the minorities. And there's a few questionable scenes in there, but it's all done in good taste. It's done for fun. Like no one would come out of this movie thinking like, oh, I hate Indian people now or something. Like, I don't think that's the point at all. They actually have very sympathetic Indian characters as well. It's just like he happens to crash there. I think he either crashed there or visits India, and that's where the story takes place. It's a new location, something that's different for American audiences. It's exotic, it's interesting, and they're just taking it the wrong way. Next is a movie called Me Before You. I've never actually heard of this film, so we'll skip over it to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is a recent movie. This is from last year, and this is already getting on the chopping block. It says, Quentin Tarantino is adored by cinephiles, and stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are charismatic and talented. So it's easy to overlook the film's regressive messages. It's about two middle-aged white guys who long for the old days in Hollywood. In other words, MHGA, Make Hollywood Great Again. The film is set in 1969 when some Americans felt the status quo was being threatened by minorities, hippies, and newly liberated women. From the controversial depiction of Bruce Lee, one of Hollywood's rare Asian stars, to the fact that black people seem non-existent, and the Mexicans, as they're called in the film, are car valets or waitresses. Tarantino's film seems to have several blind spots, and Charles Manson's white supremacist agenda is ignored. Okay, so this is going after Quentin again. We talked about this repeatedly last year. I remember seeing the movie, reviewing it for you guys, doing a bunch of videos, and yeah, most of this stuff was addressed, so it's just getting brought up in this context. I think it's just these guys, these liberals, are seeing another chance to like cancel a lot of movies. That's the problem with this issue. First of all, before we get to that though, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a great film. I wouldn't say it's offensive just because it has Hispanic people being valets and waitresses. I mean, that's jobs that they typically probably might have had. I mean, it's not like offensive to portray things in a certain way. The way they do Bruce Lee is very funny and interesting too. They kind of make him a little more overconfident and he gets beat by the Brad Pitt character. And I think the only reason that became controversial was because one of Bruce Lee's kids like complained about it and got the film canceled in China. And a lot of this is about pandering to China. And, Bruce Lee is this big Chinese star from Hong Kong, what have you. And that's besides the point. The real point here is, and the real problem is, these guys smell blood in the water. The liberals saw that this stuff in their strategies working. They saw that the BLM and the protests, they turned into statue tearing down and renaming company names, and mascots are getting taken away. And now they're coming after our movies. Now they want to cancel these movies or at least put some sort of label on them, which is just another thing that's just highly unnecessary. I mean, whatever, put a label on it, put a warning label. It's like not the end of the world, but the next step is the cancelization. Next step is they're going to re-edit the movies and cut scenes out. That's what they actually asked Tarantino to do. In this film, when it came out last year, they were trying to get him to cut out the Bruce Lee stuff so they could release it in China, but he refused. And that's why we're trying to refuse too, because these guys are artists. They make their films the way they want to make them, and they're meant to be viewed a certain way. And it shouldn't be prefaced by stupid warning labels, or you shouldn't cut out stuff that's not sensitive or not PC in the present. Like, who cares about PC culture? This stuff is all bogus, and it really needs to stop. That about wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Also hit that like button to help us get shared, and until next time, you have a great day.